Welcome to the Disability News Report. I am your host, Jennifer Price, where we are changing the narrative of conversations to intentionally make sure to include people with disabilities. If you have, let's say, a grandchild or maybe a niece or a nephew or some other family member who, as a child, is being cared and raised by someone who appears to give conflicting emotional signals as to how they feel about that child. Maybe the child is the favorite son or daughter one day and then they hate them the next day. But then you look at the child who appears to be developing some level of emotional insecurity as a result of that sort of conflicting style or conflicting signals. That child could be developing what's called disorganized attachment style. My guest today is Antonieta Contreras, who is a psychotherapist out of the New York area and who specializes especially in helping provide therapy to people with disorganized attachment style. I'm going to talk to her today about how she even got into this. She's going to talk about, believe it or not, Buddhism and that connection between Buddhism and her practicing therapy, especially in disorganized attachment. How she helps people in therapy, what exactly disorganized attachment is, what it looks like, and how you can help out a caregiver or help out a child if you're a caregiver or family member and see it happening or see the symptoms of it, how you can help. All of that coming up next. All right, so Ms. Contreras, thank you for joining us on the show today. I think this topic of disorganized attachment style is an important topic that people need to learn and know more about just to become better educated and familiarized with this concept. So if you could first describe your background and how you got into this and what made you decide to go into psychotherapy.
Okay, sure. And you can call me Antonieta if that's easier than my last name.
Okay. Thank you.
So I was a banker. I originally trained, my education is on mathematics and actuarial sciences. And then I was a banker and a consultant. And then I became a Buddhist. And I completely changed the way I saw the world. And I joined a couple of organizations and sanghas, and I was a practitioner. And I realized how difficult it was for many practitioners to really move on into their spiritual path because of all these emotional blockages they had. And it was kind of painful for me to observe how there was no flow on the, like, you know, the faith and the prayers and all the devotion was not really giving them fruits because of the emotional stuff. And then I said, no, I need to help people to move on into their spiritual practices. And I became a healer. I went to India to train. It was a very nice journey. But then I realized that I was not going to be able to have the impact that I wanted without a mental health license. So then I had to go back to school and get another master's, and I became a psychotherapist. And that's where I am now. And by practice, I was not completely aware of trauma, but with my jobs, I worked in Harlem in a city hospital and then in a clinic, a mental health clinic, and the amount of trauma was overwhelming. And then I moved on into continue training, and I did several programs, postgraduate programs, for becoming proficient in trauma and in sexual human sexuality. So, and that's where I am. I keep learning modalities and getting certified and having all the tools, as many tools as possible, because trauma is not easy to heal.
Sure, sure. And one aspect of it is disorganized attachment style. Can you just explain what exactly is that and what when I say that?
Well, it's very connected to trauma because so we are wired to attach to someone. We as humans are probably the species that is the least capable of survive without somebody else, right? And therefore, we absolutely need someone to to take care of us in order for us to be alive, to keep going, right? And that is the hardwired need to get attached to a caregiver normally. And when the caregiver, so at the beginning, when it's non-conceptual and non-verbal, we need to feel the presence of the other and the care of the other, right? We need to feel that the other is going to satisfy our needs, is going to help us with when we are hungry or when we are wet or when we are cold or when we are in pain, that somebody cares enough that we are not going to just die of hunger. Because as a baby, when you're hungry, hunger is feels life threatening, you know, or cold or colic. Like so, if the caregiver doesn't help satisfying these needs, well, there is a threat, right, in the baby. And the other component is that what I was going to say. So the attunement. So we are born dysregulated. We don't have a schedule. We don't have like from the womb to the aggressive world that we confront. Like we are, our nervous system is not mature and needs to learn to regulate. And this regulation happens by the interaction and by the communication. Alan Shore says that right brain to right brain, which teaches the nervous system of the baby to regulate through the attunement of the mother, right? And when a mother doesn't have that capacity, for example, then the baby doesn't learn to regulate. Or when the needs are not met, then the baby is afraid, right? So disorganized attachment comes from having a mother or a caregiver that is unpredictable, that sometimes is there for us and sometimes is not, that sometimes is able to respond, maybe loving and caring, and sometimes is angry and dismissive. So when the caregiver is the both the provider of safety and the provider of fear, is when we attach because we don't have a choice, we need to, but we attach in a disorganized way because we cannot predict what is gonna be happening when the caregiver approaches us or when we cry.
That's really fascinating. And what between that and then your Buddhist background and journey, I'm wondering, are there any principles of Buddhism that you apply to your current practice?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Buddha was an amazing neuroscientist to the extent that I did a 4-year program in the parallels of Buddhism and psychotherapy, you know, so, and I see the convergence is absolutely fascinating. Is how much of this influences this and this influences that. So it's almost at some point the same thing, especially in trauma treatment, because trauma treatment uses compassion, uses attunement, uses, yeah, the lack of ego, uses many of the principles of Buddhism in order to be effective to create. So in terms of attachment, like we are gonna reparent the client, right, by using us without an ego, without judgment, without an agenda, being there for the client. So the client that is disorganized or insecurely attached in general has this fear of not knowing if they count on someone when they are in distress or when they are in need, right? And in terms of emotional need, the clinician does that job. So teaching the client to trust, because in disorganized attachment, one of the characteristics is that they don't trust anybody, and they don't trust themselves either, because they internalize this fact that my mother doesn't, or my caregiver doesn't care about me because I'm worthless, because I'm not valuable enough, right? So the therapist needs all this compassion and love in the client to help have a completely different experience, and learning to trust others and to trust themselves and to find value on themselves. So yes, they are, I cannot even separate them. For me, it's like one. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm also wondering, and maybe I'm kind of stuck on the words disorganized attachment. Once it's developed through childhood, then as an adult, what does it look like? Because I guess I'm wondering, is the adult now attaching maybe to someone in their intimate relationship who has the same or similar characteristics as the parent, where they first began to develop this disorganized attachment?
Okay, so there are a couple of questions there. I'm gonna go to the first one, which is that is fascinating. I don't believe that like that is always the case, that I look for people that make me suffer the same way that my parents made me suffer. I don't think it's kind of like that. It's more like we look for what is familiar, right?
Right.
Yeah, or for, and not always, right? Some kids have the capacity from very early on to see what is wrong with the parent and say, I'm not gonna be with somebody like that, or I'm not gonna be like that when I grow up, for example, right? There are children that understand that very early on. There are others that don't, right? Because resilience and level of development and awareness depends on each individual. But some people look for what is familiar. Some people don't have the concept that, so you say they need to attach to someone like that is also disorganized. Disorganization in attachment means that they have problems attaching, right? So there is secure attachment in one side and there is insecure attachment in the other, right? And in secure attachment, you have the anxious, like this needs to know that the person is there for them. The avoidant, the one that carries anger and like is dangerous to attach. So don't get too close, because if you get too close, then I'm at risk, right? And then there's the disorganized that sometimes is anxiously attached and sometimes is avoidant, right? So that is kind of the disorganized attachment. So some people with disorganized attachment have mental issues or emotional disturbances or develop a personality disorder, most commonly borderline personality disorder, which is the personality disorder that manifests these abandonment issues and this difficulty in attaching in a healthy way to others, right? Because they flip-flop, as they say. Well, so in general, like if a person has disorganized attachment, is going to have problems in relationships, because it's going to need so badly to have another, but it's going to be so afraid of having another, right? And that is that confusion, internal confusion, is what sometimes creates emotional disturbances and can develop in all sorts of mental distress.
Well, and then just kind of picking up on that, because especially it sounds like disorganized attachment is born out of some level of childhood trauma. What's the association? Is there an association to disorganized attachment and PTSD? And if so, to what extent?
Okay. So I use the word trauma instead of PTSD. And for me, trauma is the disorder, is the phenomenon that covers the dysregulation of the nervous system, right? PTSD is kind of an official diagnosis, but it's very limited. And the trauma spectrum is really broad. And so PTSD is about one event, right? And when a child, essentially, so when a child grows up in an environment where there is no safety, when they are not confident that they are going to survive, they have fear, and the fear activates the survival mechanism of the system, right? And when that is constant and prolonged, the survival mechanism starts making alterations little by little. Learn to adapt to this, learn to adapt to that, learn to adapt to that, until one day cannot continue making small adjustments in the functioning of the nervous system, and creates a shift, a change, where there is a loss of homeostasis, of equilibrium in the system, and then the person leaves dysregulated, right? And that dysregulation, that semi-permanent dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system and the loss of homeostasis is what we call trauma, right? So when it happens very early on, when it happens at birth, like so disorganized attachment normally happens at the beginning of life, right? When the pre-verbal and the kid doesn't have concept. When that happens, so the injury and not only the fear, but as I said before, and this is very important in terms of developmental trauma or attachment trauma, if you want, is that the body never learns, the nervous system never learns to regulate. So you have the fear activating the survival mode, and at the same time, a system that never regulated. So that creates a severe dysregulation. And that dysregulation is what we call trauma. And when it's early on in life, has problems with the development of the brain and the maturity of all the parts. And that creates many, many issues. So yes, of course, there are kids that are resilient, but there are kids that are not. So not everybody with an attachment issue develops a personality disorder or developmental trauma, because our brain is wise. Our brain doesn't want to work in dysfunction. It prefers to be functional, to be optimized, right? So it's always going to try some other venues or ways. And in terms of attachment, if there is one adult, someone around that the kid can learn to attach securely, that will solve part of the problem. Because the kid or the baby or the kid could be a grandparent, could be a nanny, could be a teacher, whomever, the father, whomever is around that offers that safety, that security, that, oh, I'm not going to die, then the kid comes down and can continue developing better. Still, some trauma is going to be left, but not the full extent of having developmental trauma and all these learning disabilities and all the issues that come with developmental trauma.
Well, I'm wondering then if for family members that, or maybe a caregiver or nanny that does want to help, is there a way for them to suspect that without, even if they don't know the terminology disorganized attachment, are there characteristics that they can look for when it comes to the child? And if so, what are they? But if not, should their attention then be focused on that parent who is inconsistent in what they're doing, in their behaviors?
Well, if the parent has the capacity to understand how it's damaging the kid, hopefully it will change. Because in terms of children, what they need is reliability, right? So disorganized attachment is equivalent with unpredictability. So the opposite is what solves it, right? So if somebody can be consistent, can be reliable, can be accountable, right? So for a kid, like when they start growing up and they say, "You said that." "Oh, I never said that." Right? "You, mom, you promised you were coming." "Oh, I never said it." Or for example, right? That creates, even not necessarily at the beginning, even growing up, some people can develop some disorganized attachment later on, right? When the parent is inconsistent or when there is a divorce and then one of the parents, for example, disappear emotionally, that can create a lot of insecurity in a child that is maybe a toddler or 7, 9, 10, and they don't have the confidence, and what they do is they lost confidence on themselves. So what you need to do to help children or even adults in terms of therapy, what we offer is that consistency, that reliability, right? Like somebody that they can trust. Is a trust issue. Attachment to disorganized attachment is a trust issue.
So when you say consistency and reliability in therapy, what do you mean by that? What does that look like?
Well, that the person, uh, you can trust this person, because when they tell you something, you know that comes from a good place, and that you don't have a fear that this person is manipulating you, is lying, is promising something is not gonna, right? So in therapy, we don't make promises. We only make like what we can deliver, for instance, so that we start by teaching and modeling, setting boundaries, drawing boundaries. Yes, you can trust me, but you are free to go and explore. So exploration and curiosity is one very important characteristic that is lost with disorganized attachment. A kid that is disorganizedly attached doesn't go out to the world and explore it, and becomes dependent, becomes fearful, becomes it's so, yes, so unpredictable, the world and life, that they shut down that capacity. So in therapy, that idea of exploration, and that I trust you, that you go and you know you have me. So in trauma therapy, for example, we are more available than in other modalities, in other therapies or school of thoughts. We are more available with boundaries. So we have this combination of a healthy boundary and a healthy attachment in order for them to feel independent, but connected to somebody else.
So then what advice do you have for family members or any other caregivers who would like to help? They do see something, even if they can't actually give a term to it. And what they're seeing is disorganized attachment. They want to help the child. What, or even maybe they're now an adult, 18, 19 years old, and they still see it. What advice do you have for family members who do want to help them cope and heal?
Well, the first thought that comes to mind is send them to therapy. Find a professional that can really help them heal from a rupture, from something that became dysfunctional from very early on, right? But and I have had clients, for example, where the uncle or the grandparent or even a family friend pays for therapy for them, right? For example, which is beautiful to see when I have had it. But if they don't, or how they contribute, they can contribute even to therapy, right? Is what I was saying, by connecting, attuning, seeing the needs of the person, and reflecting back and letting them know. Like, for instance, we always assume that people love us, or they know we love them, but we don't tell them. And we need to tell them, and and show it, that we care, that we are interested, that we see them and understand their challenges, their conflicts, their needs. Is not becoming enabler. Oh yes, I understand you. No, is I want to know you better. I'm interested, and I see your point, and I see your pain, right? Because sometimes we keep things very in the surface. And I love you, oh, give me a hug. But sometimes that is not enough, because especially kids that are growing up, or teenagers or adolescents, they have so many ideas and many confusion, and disorientation is one of the characteristics of disorganized attachment. They are never certain of things, because if they have developmental issues, the prefrontal cortex was not maturing at the right pace. So they are going to be impulsive. They are going to think that they are defective, that they are wrong, that they are not good enough, instead of understanding the situation from their childhood and from the world. So the adults that want, or the people that want to help and be useful in their families, need to be attuned, need to be connected, and understanding where the person is, and trying to develop trust, right? To, as I said, I am reliable, I care, and you can count on me. Because at the end, that's all they need, to know that they can count on someone. And not only for this stress. So there are 3 levels of attachment. The first is the basic of survival. The second is belonging. And that is a very important attachment. I need to feel that I belong somewhere. And if I don't, that is even more painful, because I don't not only need someone to, when I'm in pain, I also need someone to share my life with, to know that they care, that I am part of a pack, of a tribe, of a group. Because one of the most scary things, even probably sometimes more than dying, is to be isolated, to be alone, to be rejected, to not belong.
Yeah. Well, this was a fantastic talk. I certainly thank you for your time, Antonieta.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yes,
Anytime.
absolutely. And I will see you next time.
Thanks, Jennifer. And good luck in your fantastic endeavor.
Oh, thank you so much.